Winter evenings in Philadelphia grew dark quickly, and that night the air carried the sharp bite of December. Snow began to drift softly across the elegant streets of the Rittenhouse Square neighborhood, where gas lamps glowed faintly against the frosted air. Inside the Hamilton mansion, however, warmth and luxury prevailed. The chandeliers sparkled, the fire in the marble hearth crackled gently, and the scent of polished wood and expensive perfume lingered. Preparations were underway for what Elizabeth Hamilton proudly called a family meeting, though in reality, these gatherings were often more like small celebrations of the family's achievements. Elizabeth entered the living room with an air of authority, her heels clicking against the gleaming hardwood floor. Her blonde hair was perfectly arranged in a style she had worn for decades, a timeless look meant to suggest grace and superiority. She wore a pale cashmere twin set, paired with a string of pearls that gleamed under the chandelier. Clapping her hands lightly, she drew the attention of her children, who had gathered around the room in varying clusters of conversation. "Everyone, I have wonderful news," Elizabeth announced, her voice polished with the refined resonance of old money. "Bradley has received the Young Leader Award from the Real Estate Association. Now every one of you has been honored in some way. Isn't that marvelous?" There was a ripple of polite applause. Richard Hamilton, seated on the grand leather sofa as though it were a throne, nodded with quiet satisfaction. His steel-gray hair was combed perfectly, his bespoke suit still crisp even at the end of the day. The head of Hamilton Real Estate, the dynasty that had spanned 4 generations, always maintained his posture of authority. "Wonderful," Richard said, his deep voice calm and steady. "Thank you, Bradley, for upholding the Hamilton family tradition." Bradley, the third son, shifted modestly in his chair, but his eyes betrayed his pride. His siblings, Jeffrey, the eldest and most serious, Michael, the smooth-talking second son, and the sisters, Caroline and Patricia, cheered and patted his shoulder with enthusiasm. In the corner of the room sat Meredith, the fifth of 6 children, her posture quiet and unobtrusive. She wore a simple black pantsuit, having come straight from her job at the museum. The soft lamplight caught the strands of her brown hair, loosely tied back, and the faint shadows under her eyes revealed long hours of work. Unlike her siblings, she seemed out of place in the grandeur of the Hamilton living room. Elizabeth's sharp gaze caught her. "Meredith, don't you have anything to say?" Meredith straightened slightly. "Congratulations, Brad." "I can't hear you," her mother said, tilting her head in displeasure. "Congratulations, Bradley," Meredith repeated, her voice a little louder, though still quiet compared to the boisterous cheer of the others. Elizabeth sighed dramatically. "Really? When will you learn the basics of social etiquette? Perhaps my teaching was inadequate." Richard's eyes barely flicked toward his daughter. "What was it again? That curator job at the, what museum?" "The Meredith Museum," Meredith corrected softly. "Yes, I've recently been promoted to head curator." His reply was flat, uninterested. "You exhibit the history of monarchy or something?" "It's contemporary art," Meredith explained, her voice carrying more conviction now. "I'm organizing a special exhibition featuring up-and-coming artists. It opens tomorrow." But by then, Bradley had already launched into details about his award, and the family's attention shifted back to him. Meredith's words dissolved into the air like mist. Her gaze drifted toward the tall windows. Snow was falling heavily now, the flakes tumbling in lazy spirals before settling on the bare branches outside. She thought of all the occasions she had been left out of, her brother's weddings, her sister's celebrations, even her parents' grand anniversary party. The exclusion had been so consistent it no longer surprised her, though it still stung. Elizabeth suddenly rose with renewed energy. "Well, let's take a commemorative photo, the whole family." "Me, too?" Meredith asked quietly, the question slipping out before she could stop herself. An uncomfortable silence lingered for a moment. Finally, Elizabeth forced a smile. "Yes, of course. But perhaps you could change out of that, what do you call it, artistic outfit. Something more proper would be appropriate for the press." Meredith glanced down at her black pantsuit. It wasn't glamorous, but it was professional, elegant in its simplicity. "I'm fine as I am." "As stubborn as ever," Elizabeth muttered. "The photos will go to the papers. You know, we are the heirs of Hamilton Real Estate." "I am not an heir," Meredith replied quietly but firmly. I work at a museum. Elizabeth waved a hand dismissively. Not bad as a hobby, but one day you'll have to face reality. The photographer was brought in, and Meredith was positioned slightly apart from the others. As the camera flashed, she tried to summon a smile, but her eyes betrayed her emptiness. The photos would be published as another glossy proof of Hamilton's success, though she knew her presence would likely be cropped or overlooked. When it was over, the family's attention shifted once again to themselves. Conversations about business deals, promotions, and social engagements filled the air. No one noticed as Meredith slipped quietly out of the living room. In the hallway, she pulled out her phone. A single message lit up her screen, and immediately her lips curved into a smile more genuine than any she had worn that evening. How are the preparations for tomorrow's gallery opening? That handsome collector, James, said he's coming, too. The message was from Sophia, her closest friend and colleague at the museum. Meredith felt a warmth spread through her chest. She thought of James Morrison, the art enthusiast with sharp eyes and a gentle smile, who had recently taken her out for coffee more than once. She thought of Professor Walter, who had been her mentor and supporter since her earliest days at the museum, and she thought of her colleagues, who had celebrated her promotion with real joy, not empty formality. That was her real family. Meredith slipped on her coat, her heart lighter now than it had been all evening. Tomorrow was the opening of her exhibition, a day she had poured her energy into for months, and her third cafe date with James. Taking one last look at the snow-dusted world outside, she stepped out of the Hamilton mansion without saying goodbye to anyone. Affection. James drew Meredith into his arms, holding her close with the kind of embrace that dissolved years of pain and loneliness. True family isn't about blood relations, he whispered against her hair. It's about people who love and support you. Let's invite your real family to our wedding, the people you've chosen. Meredith's eyes filled with tears. For so long, she had yearned for someone to say those words aloud. Yes, she whispered back. I want to ask Sophia to be my maid of honor, and I'd like Professor Walter to walk me down the aisle. James smiled tenderly and kissed her hand. That's a wonderful idea. We're going to create a new family, a true family built on love and respect. The glass atrium of the Philadelphia Center for Contemporary Art glowed like a lantern as dusk settled over the city. White lanterns twined with green ivy hung above, casting soft patterns of light and shadow across the polished floors. Snow fell lightly outside, its silence a contrast to the gentle hum of voices within. Nearly 80 guests filled the rows of chairs, each seat occupied by people who had walked beside Meredith and James through the years, colleagues, students, mentors, and loyal friends. Inside the dressing room, Meredith gazed at her reflection. Her gown was simple yet breathtaking, silk that flowed like water, tailored perfectly to her frame. Wildflowers were woven into her loosely styled hair, giving her an air of quiet, natural beauty. She touched her cheek and exhaled shakily. Sophia, standing beside her in a pale blue dress, offered an encouraging smile. Ready? Meredith laughed softly. I'm a little nervous. Of course you are, Sophia said warmly, taking her hand. But this is your day, Meredith. You've worked harder than anyone I know to get here. A knock came at the door, and when it opened, Professor Walter stepped in. His kind eyes softened when he saw her. Meredith, he said with quiet emotion, you look radiant. I feel deeply honored that you've asked me to walk you down the aisle. Professor Walter, she replied, slipping her hand into his arm. Thank you for doing what a real father should have done. He patted her hand gently. Blood doesn't determine family. Family is made of the people you choose, and who choose you. The music began, filling the atrium with soft, resonant notes. Guests rose from their seats as Sophia glided down the aisle, followed by Meredith, her arm linked with her mentor's. Gasps of admiration rose when she appeared, her quiet dignity capturing every eye in the room. At the altar, James stood waiting, his face lit up the moment he saw her, and his eyes never left hers. Beside him, Marcus, his closest friend, stood proudly as best man. The ceremony was intimate, tender. Instead of following rigid tradition, Meredith and James spoke vows shaped by their own lives and journeys. I met you through art, Meredith said, her voice trembling with emotion. In you, I found both truth and beauty. You taught me what family truly means. From today onward, we begin the story of our new family." James's reply was equally moving. "Every day, I am amazed by your strength, your kindness, your courage. No matter where life takes us, I will always walk beside you." The words hung in the air, wrapping around the guests like a blessing. The reception was held in the museum's main gallery, its soaring walls adorned with vibrant contemporary works. Laughter and the clinking of glasses filled the room. Professor Walter delivered a heartfelt speech about Meredith's growth and resilience, while Sophia told light-hearted stories of their friendship. Tears, smiles, and warm embraces carried the evening forward. Though Meredith's blood family was absent, the love in the gallery was undeniable. She belonged here, among these people, in this chosen family. James's guests included several prominent figures from the art world. Despite his decision to step out from under his father's vast shadow, James Morrison was still respected, admired, and inevitably tied to the Morrison name. A photographer discreetly captured the ceremony and reception, and by the next morning, the story was splashed across society pages. James Morrison, son of art world giant William Morrison, marries museum curator Meredith Hamilton. The article praised their union, referring to James as the Prince of the art world, while highlighting Meredith's rising reputation in Philadelphia's contemporary art scene. It described her as innovative, bold, and increasingly influential. It even mentioned that the couple planned to co-found a foundation to support emerging artists. That evening, the Hamilton mansion sat in uneasy silence. Elizabeth Hamilton sat stiffly on the sofa. The newspaper spread across her lap. Her eyes scanned the headline again and again, unwilling to believe the smiling couple pictured there. "I can't believe it," she whispered, her voice trembling. Meredith, with the Morrison family. Richard, seated beside her, yanked the paper from her hands. His eyes narrowed as he read. "The son of William Morrison," Elizabeth continued, pacing now. "One of the wealthiest families in New York. The foundation alone donates millions every year. And James himself, Princeton professor, art philanthropist. How did we miss this?" Richard's complexion paled. Why didn't she say anything? From the corner of the room, Caroline's quiet voice cut through. "She did. She tried to tell us. None of us listened." The silence that followed was heavy, accusatory. Richard finally broke it, his tone stern. "We must repair the relationship immediately. A connection with the Morrison family could be invaluable to our business. But first, where do they live?" Elizabeth's brow furrowed. "New York? Philadelphia?" Patricia, who had been scrolling on her phone, chimed in. "I heard she bought a house in the Little House district. That's where they plan to settle." Richard stood abruptly, his decision final. "Family meeting. Tomorrow morning. We'll pay them a visit. We'll bring gifts. The finest we can find. She must know her family supports her." Caroline's voice was soft but firm. "We're the ones who didn't value her." No one responded. Her words dissolved, ignored in the flurry of plans. That night, the Hamilton home buzzed with rare excitement, but it wasn't born of love, nor of regret. It was ambition, the gleam of opportunity. They spoke of alliances, influence, and connections, never of Meredith's happiness. No one thought of the daughter who had walked away from them long ago. Their minds were fixed only on the Morrison name, and what it might bring them.